The world of magic doesn't end with the turning of a page. Love rises and falls anew, forbidden like poison or blazing like a phoenix's flame. The heroes we thought we knew uncover their hearts once more. So step into the enchantment of emotion. The rain had been falling for 3 days, and by the time she reached the wrought iron gate, it had worked its way past every seam of her coat, past wool and cotton, down to the skin, so that she was less a person walking than a column of cold moving through colder air. Her boots were ruined. She had stopped noticing that somewhere around the 3rd mile. The gate was not locked. That was the first thing that frightened her. It stood open by the width of a body, and the black iron was slick and beaded. And beyond it, the drive curved away between hedges that had not been trimmed since the summer, running wild in a way the Malfoys would once have considered a personal humiliation. Somewhere far up that avenue of overgrowth, the house was waiting with all its windows lit, and every one of those lights had been left burning for her. They know I'm coming. Of course they know. That was the entire point. Hermione Granger put her hand on the wet iron and made herself remember the kitchen at Grimmauld Place 4 nights ago. The tooth of old parchment under her fingertips, the map with its ink smeared where someone had set down a cup, and Moody's magical eye rolling toward her before anyone had spoken her name aloud. There is one person in this room they might believe. Nobody had argued. That was the part she kept returning to in the long hours of walking. Nobody had argued. She stepped through. The gravel had gone to mud. It sucked at her heels and released her with small obscene sounds, and the hedges leaned in overhead, dripping, so that the walk became a tunnel, and at the far end of the tunnel a shape detached itself from the shadow of the yew and came down the drive toward her, unhurried, coat black and gleaming and utterly dry. She stopped walking. Her wand was gone, surrendered 2 miles back, buried under a flat stone by a stile, because a defector who arrived armed was a defector who arrived lying. And without it, her right hand did not know where to be. It curled at her side. He halted 6 feet away. Rain ran off the edge of an invisible dome above him and made a ring on the ground, a perfect circle of falling water, and she stood outside it, streaming. Granger. Nothing in the voice. Not triumph, not disgust. It was the tone in which a man reads out a name from a list, and it did more damage than shouting would have. Malfoy. He looked at her for a long moment. His face had thinned since Hogwarts. The bones showed more, and beneath the eyes the skin had gone the grey of paper left in a window. There was a stillness to him that was new and that she did not like, the stillness of something that has learned exactly how much movement is safe. You walked. I walked. From where? Does it matter? It will, he said, when you're asked. And you'll be asked, so decide now and don't decide twice. His eyes moved past her shoulder, up the drive, back. How long since you ate? The question was so far from anything she had prepared for that she answered it honestly. 2 days. Something passed over his face, quick as a moth at a window, and was gone before she could name it. Good, he said. That's useful. Starving is credible. Fed is not. He drew a breath. Listen to me now, because we have perhaps 90 seconds, and I don't intend to repeat any part of it. There are 4 of them at the top of the steps, and 1 at the drawing-room window, and every one of them is watching us through this rain. From the moment we come into the light, you have never known me. Not at school, not once, not kindly. I am the man who found you. You are the thing I found. Do you understand the difference? Yes. Say it back. Her jaw tightened. You found me. I'm a piece of property that walked in on its own legs. Yes. He seemed almost relieved. Yes. And you will not look at me. That's the one I need you to hold. Whatever else you do wrong tonight, hold that one. When you're afraid, you will want to look at the only face you recognize, and that is a reflex. And reflexes are what get people opened up in this house. A muscle moved in his cheek. Find something else. The floor, the fire. Bellatrix, if you can stand it. She likes being looked at. She'll read it as fear, and fear is exactly right. The rain came harder. It was in her collar, running the length of her spine. And you, she said, what are you going to do? He did not answer straight away, and in the space where the answer should have been, she heard, distantly, a peacock cry. One bird, somewhere in the wet dark, the last of them, still keeping to a garden that no longer belonged to anyone she would call human. I'm going to be very convincing, he said. Draco? No. Sharp, low, the first crack in that terrible composure. Not that. Not ever. Not once. Not even when you think no one is close enough to hear. In this house, I am Malfoy to you, and you are Granger to me. And if you slip on that, I will have to correct you in front of witnesses, and you will not enjoy the way I have to do it. He shut his eyes briefly. Please. The word did not fit him. It sat between them in the downpour like something dropped and not picked up. All right, she said. There's one more thing. He looked at the mud, not at her. Before we reach the steps, they'll expect it. If it doesn't happen, they'll notice the absence more than they'd notice the act. And I need you to understand that I am not asking permission. I'm giving you warning. Because if you flinch in the wrong direction, you'll take it worse than you have to. It took her a moment. Then it landed, and her stomach turned over slowly, and the cold went from her skin into the middle of her chest. How bad. Bad enough to be seen from a window. His throat moved. Turn your head with it. Don't brace. Bracing is what breaks bone. You've thought about this. I have thought about very little else for 4 days, he said. And then his face closed like a door, and he stepped out of his circle of dry ground into the rain with her, and the water hit him and darkened his hair within seconds, and he became, in that instant, a man standing in weather rather than above it. Walk, he said. She walked. The house came at them out of the murk in pieces. First the pale stone shoulder of it, then the long ranks of windows, then the steps, and on the steps 4 figures in black with hoods thrown back, because they no longer needed hoods in their own country. Lantern light lay in shallow yellow pools on the wet stone. Yaxley she recognized. The others were shapes with faces attached, and one of them laughed as she came into the light, a wet, appreciative sound, and she felt the laugh land somewhere below her ribs and stay there. Don't look at him. Whatever happens, don't look. 20 feet from the steps, Draco's hand closed on the back of her collar and hauled, and she went down onto her knees in the gravel hard enough to feel the stones through cloth and skin. The pain was clean and immediate and almost welcome. because it was real, and everything else about the last 4 days had been theatre. "Found her at the Wiltshire boundary," he said, and his voice had changed entirely. It had gone flat and bored and carrying, pitched for the steps, pitched for the window. 4 hours she's been walking. No wand. Says she has something to trade. Says, Yaxley repeated. Says. A pause, exquisitely judged. "I didn't ask twice. That's not my job. It's yours, and you're welcome to it." Somebody snorted. The tension on the steps loosened by a fraction. She felt it go, the way you feel a room decide about you. And she understood with a cold clarity that she had just watched a man perform contempt so well that it had bought her another 60 seconds of life. Then Yaxley said pleasantly, "You're standing very close to her, Malfoy." The rain filled the silence. She did not look up. She looked at the gravel, at a single white stone among the grey ones, at the way water was beading on the toe of her ruined boot, and she thought, with a strange floating detachment, "Here it is then. This is the moment. This is what he meant." "Am I?" Draco said. The blow came across her cheekbone with the flat of his hand, and she turned her head with it as he had told her to, and the world went white and then loud, and she was down on one palm in the mud with the taste of copper flooding under her tongue. Nobody on the steps laughed now. The quality of their attention had changed to something businesslike and satisfied. "Better?" Draco said. "Marginally," said Yaxley. "Then somebody open the bloody door, because I'm wet, and she's not worth the pneumonia." Hands took her arms. She was hauled up and through the doorway into a wall of heat, into the smell of wood smoke and old carpet, and something underneath both of those that was faintly, chemically sweet, and the great hall swallowed her whole. Marble, chandeliers with half their candles lit, a long staircase going up into darkness, portraits with their subjects fled. They put her in a chair in the drawing room and left her there under the eye of a thin man who did not speak, and for 1 hour and then another, she sat dripping onto the parquet while the house moved around her. Footsteps, doors, a woman's laugh somewhere above, and the side of her face swelled slowly until her eye no longer opened properly. She did not cry. She catalogued. 3 doors from the hall. A window with a warded latch. The corridor that ran east toward the library, which she remembered from a night she preferred not to remember. She counted the candles, and she counted the exits, and she held on to the numbers the way a drowning person holds on to wood. It was past 2 in the morning when the thin man was called away, and the door opened and closed, and someone crossed the room in perfect silence and crouched in front of her chair. She knew who it was before she looked. She had promised not to look. She looked anyway. Draco Malfoy's hair was still damp. In the low firelight, his eyes were the colour of rainwater over slate, and they moved once over the ruin of her cheek, and his hand came up, hesitated, and did not touch her. "Don't," he breathed. "Don't ever do that again. If you look at me like that in front of them, we are both dead by morning." "Then don't kneel in front of me," she whispered back. "Ever again." Something broke behind his face. He rose, and he reached into his coat, and he set on the arm of her chair a small stoppered vial of dittany and a heel of bread wrapped in a linen napkin. And then he was moving toward the door, fast, because footsteps were coming down the corridor, and there were only seconds left. The library at Malfoy Manor faced north, and in winter it never warmed. His grandfather had built it that way on purpose. Cold air preserved bindings, and so the rooms smelled of vellum and dust and the faint mineral chill of stone that has not been warm since October. Draco had spent his childhood on the ladder in the third alcove, reading things he had been forbidden and things nobody had thought to forbid, because nobody imagined he would care. Now he stood in the middle of the carpet at 1 o'clock in the morning with his wand loose in his hand and watched Hermione Granger seat herself in the chair opposite and arrange her hands in her lap. And he thought, with a precision that had become habitual, about how many ways this could kill them. 4 days she had been in the house. 4 days of the Dark Lord absent on business in the north. 4 days of grace that were running out like water through a cupped palm. And when he came back, he would look at her. Not speak to her. Look. And whatever lived behind her eyes would be his to read as easily as a shop sign. "Sit forward," Draco said. "Not back. If you're back in the chair, your shoulders come up when you're frightened, and that tells me where to push." "Does it?" "It tells everyone where to push. It's the first thing Aunt Bellatrix reads on a person, and she reads it from across a room." He turned the wand over once in his fingers. "Forward, hands still, feet flat." She did it. The bruise on her cheekbone had gone through purple into a yellow-green that made the whole left side of her face look borrowed from somebody else. And she had not once mentioned it, and he had not once asked, and the not asking sat in his chest like a swallowed stone. "Now," he said, "what do you know about occlumency?" "Theory. I've read Perrin and the Beaumont commentary. Emptying the mind, walling the surface." "Forget Perrin. Perrin was writing for court wizards worried about diplomats. Emptying the mind is a technique for people who will be probed politely." He crossed to the fire, unlit. He had not lit it because light under a door invited company, and stood with his back to the cold grate. The Dark Lord does not probe. He opens. Trying to empty yourself in front of him is like trying to hold a door shut against water. You cannot make a mind blank. You can only make it loud. She looked up. Her eyes caught what little light there was from the single candle on the table between them, and it was appalling how quickly he had learned to notice that. "Loud," she repeated. "Give him something to find, something true and ordinary and boring. A memory with weight to it, so it has the texture of a real thing, but with no consequence. He goes in expecting resistance. He meets furniture instead, and furniture is what an emptied-out, frightened girl ought to have." He paused. "The trick is that it has to be genuine. Invented memories are thin. They photograph badly, if you like. He'll walk straight through a fabrication and out the other side into whatever you were hiding behind it. So, I have to hand him something real. You have to hand him something real that you can bear to have handled." Draco heard his own voice go quieter and could not stop it. "Choose it carefully, Granger. Whatever you give him, you will never own it privately again." She was silent for a moment. Rain, endless that winter, the whole county drowning, ticked against the north windows in irregular handfuls. "All right," she said. "Do it." "Not yet. First, you need to know what it feels like, or you'll flinch, and the flinch is the tell." He came around the table. "I'm going to go in shallow, surface only. It will feel like pressure behind the eyes, and then a kind of sliding. Don't fight it. I want you to learn the sensation, not resist it. And you'll see whatever's there. Yes, everything. Whatever surfaces first. He met her look and made himself hold it. I am aware of what I'm asking. There is no version of this that isn't an intrusion. If you'd rather have someone else teach you, name them and I'll fetch them. The silence stretched. Somewhere below in the house, a door closed and a man's laugh went by and faded. There isn't anyone else, she said. No, there isn't. He raised the wand. Say when. She squared her shoulders, forward as instructed, hands still, and said, when? Legilimens. The manor went out like a snuffed wick, and he was inside. Rain first, of course, rain. The whole of her recent life was rain. And then a hedge tunnel and mud pulling at boots, discarded, too near the surface, useless. He pushed past it. A kitchen, low ceiling, the tooth of parchment under fingertips, a magical eye swiveling. Grimmauld. He backed off that one so fast his own pulse jumped, because he did not want it. Because knowing where they were was the single most dangerous cargo a man could carry into this house. Deeper. A younger face, freckles, laughing over a chessboard, a cat on a windowsill, a library that was not this library, warm, gold, hundreds of candles, and the particular consuming happiness of a girl of 12 with a book too heavy for her lap. And then, without warning, himself, 4th year. The great hall in December, the enchanted ceiling snowing, and he was crossing the floor in dress robes with his chin up, and the memory. Hermione was standing at the foot of the staircase in blue with her hair pinned, and she was not looking at Crumb. She was looking at him, at the boy going past, and the feeling that came off the memory was not hatred. It was complicated and half-formed and irritated with itself, a 15-year-old's fury at her own attention, and underneath it, unmistakably, a thread of something wistful and unwilling and warm. Draco pulled out so hard he staggered. The library came back, cold stone, dead grate, one candle guttering in the draught from the window. His heart was going like a hunted animal's. Across from him, Hermione had both hands pressed flat on the table, and her face had drained of everything, and she was staring at the wood with the fixed intensity of a woman waiting for a verdict. Neither of them spoke. She kept it. That was the thing that had knocked the breath out of him. Not that it had happened. He had been 14 and vain, and might have imagined 100 such glances, but that it was there, near the surface, unarchived, still lit. People did not keep memories like that by accident. Memories like that were kept the way a person keeps a pressed flower in a book they no longer read, without intention, without inspection, but they were kept. Well, she said to the table, that was longer than I meant. His voice came out wrong. He corrected it. Your surface is chaotic. That's actually not bad. Chaos slows an intruder. Your problem is depth. Everything important in you is stored close to the top because you've never had to hide anything in your life. I've hidden things. You've kept secrets. That's different. A secret is something you decide not to say. A hidden memory is something you decide not to be, for as long as another mind is in the room. He set the wand down on the table, deliberately, so that his hand would have something to do besides shake. Again, and this time, when you feel the pressure, I want you to push a memory at me. Anything. Make it the loudest thing in the room." They went again, and again, and a fourth time, and by the fifth the candle had burned down 2 inches, and her hands were trembling, and she pushed him a memory of an examination hall, quills, the smell of ink, a clock, so aggressively that he came out of it dizzy and almost laughed. "Better," he said. "That's better. That's actually good. It's a memory of a test, Malfoy. It's a memory of a room where you were frightened and nothing happened to you. That's exactly what we want. Fear with no cause behind it." He rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Keep it. That's your furniture. When he comes for you, you give him the examination hall." She nodded slowly. Then, "Sit down. You're grey." "I'm always grey." "You're grey in a new way." She said it without inflection, but she had noticed, and the noticing was its own kind of trespass, and he found he did not mind it as much as he should have. He sat. The candle spat. Wax ran over the lip of the holder and cooled in a pale tongue on the wood, and for a while neither of them said anything at all, and it should have been unbearable, and instead was very nearly restful. The first unwatched silence he had shared with another human being in over a year. "You saw the Yule Ball," she said. He had known it was coming. He had hoped it wasn't. "I saw a great many things. I don't catalogue them." "You went pale and let go of the spell like it burned you." She was looking at him now, direct, that maddening, scholarly steadiness she brought to everything. "So don't do the thing where you make me feel mad for having seen you see it." His knuckles had gone white where he gripped the arm of the chair. He made himself open his hand finger by finger. "All right," he said. "I saw it. It doesn't mean anything. No. I was 15, and you were the most objectionable person I had ever met, and my brain does what it likes with faces I've spent a lot of time being angry at." "Yes," he said, "naturally. So, there's no need for—" She gestured, a small, furious motion, and then abandoned it, and instead began to straighten the cuff of her sleeve, which was already straight, twice, 3 times, turning it under her fingers with fierce concentration. "There's no need for either of us to think about it. None whatsoever. Good. Good." The candle guttered and steadied. Outside, the rain thickened, and a gust took the north windows and made the old glass shudder in its lead. And Draco sat 6 feet away from her in the cold, and understood, with a sensation like a wire drawing tight through the centre of his chest, that something in the architecture of his life had just quietly shifted position and would not be moving back. He should have ended the lesson there. He knew it even as he did not. "Tell me something," she said instead. "Why you agreed to vouch for me." "Because your people asked and mine were listening." "That's not an answer. If I'm found out, you die. Not exile, not Azkaban. You die on the drawing room floor with your mother watching. You understood that before you said yes." She leaned forward. "So why?" He looked at the dead grate for a long time. "There was a night last spring," he said at last, "when I was given a task and I couldn't do it. Not wouldn't. Couldn't. I stood on a tower with my wand up and my arm went to water and somebody else finished it for me. And I have spent every day since then in a house full of people who are waiting to find out which of those 2 words applies." He turned the ring on his little finger, once, the silver biting cold into the skin. "When Snape came to me about you, I thought, here is a thing I might be able to do. That's all. It wasn't nobility. It was arithmetic. And now, Draco said, the arithmetic has changed, and I would very much rather not examine how. She did not answer that. She had gone still, properly still, not the trained stillness he had been drilling into her, but the arrested stillness of someone who has been handed something they did not expect to be given. The single candle chose that moment to drown itself in its own wax and go out, and the library dropped into a darkness thick as felt. And in it he heard her breathe in, and then, quite distinctly from the corridor beyond the door, the sound of a woman's slow footsteps stopping directly outside. The dark was absolute, and in it every other sense enlarged obscenely. She could hear the rain finding a fault in the north gutter. She could hear the tick of cooling wax. She could hear, through 8 inches of oak, the particular sound of a woman standing still in a corridor at 1:30 in the morning and deciding what she had heard. Hermione did not move. She had learned, in 4 days, that the body wants to fill silence with small adjustments, a shift of weight, a swallow, and that each one is a syllable spoken to whoever is listening. Then Draco's voice came out of the blackness, pitched not at her, but at the door, bored to the point of insolence. Which is why you'll copy it out again, and again, until the hand is right, because if a single loop of your script differs from the specimen I gave you, the man reading it will know inside a heartbeat, and I will not be the one explaining it. A pause. Then, silkily from the other side of the wood. In the dark, Draco. The candle went out 4 minutes ago, Mother. I was allowing myself the luxury of not having got up yet. The handle turned. Light came in first, a raised wand, cold white, and behind it, Narcissa Malfoy, in a dressing gown of dove-coloured silk, her pale hair loose over one shoulder, and her face doing nothing at all. She looked at her son in his chair. She looked at Hermione, seated forward, hands still, feet flat, 3 feet of table between them, and a scatter of parchment on it that Draco had arranged there at midnight for exactly this contingency. You keep unusual hours, Narcissa said. So does the Dark Lord. She needs to be usable by Thursday. Narcissa's gaze travelled the length of the table and back. It rested for perhaps half a second on the ruined candle. There are candles in the second drawer of the escritoire. Your grandmother kept them there for precisely this reason. Thank you. Don't work her to pieces, said Narcissa. Broken tools embarrass the man who brought them. And she turned and went, and the white light went with her, and the door clicked shut with a softness that was somehow worse than a slam. Neither of them moved for a full minute. She knows, Hermione whispered. She knows something. Draco's chair creaked as he rose. That's not the same thing. And if you can't hold the difference in your head, you'll start behaving as though the worst has happened, and behaving that way is how the worst arrives. A drawer scraped, flint sparked, a new candle bloomed and shoved the shadows back into the corners of the room. His face in the fresh light was composed to the point of blankness. Go to bed, Granger. You're no use to me shaking. She went. She lay in the small cold room they had given her under the east eaves, and she did not sleep. And at some point after 4 the rain stopped, and the silence that replaced it was worse. The instruction came on the 6th day through Yaxley in the breakfast room where the long windows looked onto a lawn gone to seed. "You'll want to justify the food," he said, without preamble, buttering toast. "Names, girl. Locations. You've been at the heart of it for years. You've sat at their table, and thus far you have given us a great deal of weather and nothing you could put in a report." Hermione kept her eyes on the tablecloth. She had learned that too. Never at the face, never at the floor. The floor was submission, and submission bored them. The face was insolence, and insolence entertained them. The tablecloth was nothing, and nothing was survivable. "They move constantly," she said. "So does everyone. Try harder. There's a safe house." The knife stopped. She gave them Bellwood Cottage. The Order had chosen it in a room in Grimmauld Place, with 4 people arguing and Kingsley silent at the end of the table. And it had been decided that the cottage was worth the cost. Empty for 11 days now, protections stripped and relaid to look hastily abandoned, with a scatter of real detritus in the sink and a real Order sigil half burned in the grate. It would take them a night to find it, and an hour to be certain nobody had lived there for a fortnight, and it would buy her a month of credibility. It also had a name. Molly Weasley had chosen the name years ago, off a hedge full of bellflowers, and Hermione had eaten 12 breakfasts in that kitchen, and she said the name aloud to Corbin Yaxley over a rack of toast, and felt something small and private tear inside her chest. "Bellwood," Yaxley said. "Where?" "Somerset, above the levels. There's a lane off the Wedmore Road. The turning isn't marked. 2 miles. It's got a Fidelius, but the secret keeper was Emmeline Vance." Emmeline Vance, who is dead. Which is why the charm has failed, and why you'll be able to walk in, and every part of this is true, and that is why it will work. And you know this how? Because I was there in August when they were deciding what to do about it after she was killed, and nobody had the heart to say the obvious thing, which is that the whole place had been hanging open like a gate ever since. She let a note of bitterness come into it, real bitterness, harvested from somewhere adjacent and true. "They're sentimental. It's their defining defect. They knew it was compromised, and they left the beds made." Somebody at the other end of the table laughed. Yaxley did not. "Sentimental," he repeated. "And you aren't. Not anymore. What changed? Here it is." She had rehearsed this until the words were worn smooth, and now that the moment came, she found the rehearsal was worthless, and she had to do it from the bone. "Nothing changed," she said. "That's what I couldn't make them understand. I've been arguing the same case for 2 years, that we were losing, that we had always been losing, that the only reason to keep going was so that certain people could feel a particular way about themselves while other people died in the actual fields. And every time I said it, someone would look at me kindly and start talking about hope." Her hands were flat on the cloth. She did not permit them to close. "I got tired of being looked at kindly. That's all. There was no thunderclap. I sat in a kitchen at 3 in the morning and did the arithmetic, and it came out the way it had been coming out for months. And then I walked." Silence down the length of the table. "You'll be verified," Yaxley said at last. "I assumed." "By him." "I assumed that too." She got up because she had been dismissed by the movement of his hand, and she walked the length of the breakfast room with her spine straight and her knees liquid. And at the door, she passed Draco, who was leaning against the frame with a cup of coffee he was not drinking, and who did not look at her, and whose free hand had gone white-knuckled around the saucer's rim. They came for the cottage that night. It went exactly as the Order had planned it. Nobody there, ashes cold, a raid that produced 3 sacks of correspondence, carefully seeded 4 days in advance. And one of the sacks contained a duty roster naming an operative in the Department of Magical Transport, whom the Order had already extracted to Ireland, and who would now, in absentia, be blamed for 2 years of leaks he had not caused. Hermione learned all this at 11 the next morning, in the drawing room, standing on the parquet before an audience of 9. "Adequate," said Yaxley. "Adequate," agreed a soft voice from the wing chair by the fire, and the room changed temperature. Bellatrix Lestrange had come back with the raiding party. She sat with one leg folded under her, and her wand held loosely across her lap like a sleeping cat, and her eyes were black and shining, and entirely without flaw. "Adequate," she said again, tasting it. "Only, I did think, walking through those dear little rooms, I did think how warm it must have been. All those beds made up. Somebody had put dried lavender in the linen press. Isn't that a nice touch? Isn't that a homely touch?" She smiled. "Whose room was the one at the back, mud-blood, above the kitchen, the one with the good window?" "Careful. I don't know. You lived there. I stayed there. Twice." "Twice," Bellatrix breathed. "Only twice. And yet you knew about the lavender." "Everyone knew about the lavender. Molly puts lavender in everything. It's a running." The word was out of her mouth, and half a breath into the air before she heard it. Molly. Not Mrs. Weasley. Not the Weasley woman. Not the mother. Not any of the 17 constructions she had built and drilled and carried in her mouth like a stone for 6 days. Molly. The name a person uses for someone whose kitchen they have wept in. The room understood it before she had finished the sentence. She felt the attention swing round on her like a door in wind. 9 faces, and Bellatrix's smile widening slowly, luxuriously, the smile of a woman watching a fly find the glue. "Molly," Bellatrix said, and Draco laughed. It cut across the room, ugly and delighted and perfectly timed, and every head turned. He was standing by the window with his arms folded and an expression of pure malicious enjoyment on his face, and Hermione had never in her life been so grateful to be looked at with such contempt. "Oh, that's marvellous," he said. "That's genuinely marvellous. Do go on, Granger. Tell them about Molly. Tell them about the jumpers." He turned to the room, to Bellatrix, to Yaxley, spreading his hands. "Do none of you understand what you're looking at? She wasn't a soldier. She was a pet. 6 years of being kept in that family like a clever animal, fed, praised, patted on the head at Christmas. And you're all standing about being sinister because the creature still uses the name of the woman who fed it." He looked at Hermione with an expression that made her stomach drop, even knowing what it was. "It's pathetic, but it isn't treason. Ask her whether Molly would have her back." Bellatrix's head tilted. "Well," she said, "would she?" Hermione's mouth was dry. "No." "Why not?" "Because I've just given you her sister-in-law's safe house and a name from her husband's department, and by tonight there'll be men in Ireland asking questions. She heard her own voice go flat and hard and hollow, and she let it, and the hollowness was not acted. There's no road back from that. She'll say my name, and then she'll stop saying it. That's how they do it. You stop existing at the table. Something moved in Bellatrix's face. Not sympathy, the connoisseur's satisfaction of a woman who has been handed a well-cut piece of grief. "Yes," she said softly. "That's right. That's exactly right." She uncoiled from the chair. "Keep her. She's still leaking, but she's leaking in the right direction. Draco, you brought her. You'll keep her tight. If she says one more sweet little name at my breakfast table, it'll be your evening that goes badly, not hers." "Understood." "I don't think you do," said Bellatrix, and she crossed the room and put one long white finger under her nephew's chin and lifted, the way one lifts a child's face to inspect it for lies. Draco did not flinch, did not blink, did not breathe wrong. "You laughed very quickly, sweet boy." "I laugh at everything. It's my only remaining hobby." She held him there for 3 full seconds. Then she let go and drifted from the room, and the audience broke up in her wake with the loose chatter of people released from a performance, and Yaxley collected his papers, and somebody rang for coffee. Hermione stood on the parquet with her heart slamming, and watched Draco walk out without a backward glance. And it was not until much later, climbing the east stairs in the dark, one hand on the cold banister, that she found what he had left for her. Folded small and wedged into the gap where the 3rd baluster had come loose from the rail. A scrap of paper bearing 4 words in a hand she was learning to know. Say her name aloud. Alone. Tonight. Get it out of you. She burned the note in the candle flame at 2 in the morning, and then stood at the window of the East Eaves room with the ash still greasy on her fingertips, and did as she was told. "Molly," she said, to the black lawn and the ruined hedges and the county sleeping under frost. "Molly Weasley." It came out cracked. She said it again, and a 3rd time, and by the 4th the name had stopped being a wound and become a word, which was the whole of his instruction and the whole of its cruelty. He had understood, better than she had, that a thing kept unspoken swells until it bursts out at the wrong table. She said the other names too. Then, because once begun, she could not stop. Ginny, Ron, Harry, Arthur, the twins. She stood in a cold room in a house full of murderers and emptied herself of everyone she loved, quietly, methodically, the way one drains a wound. And when it was finished, she was hollow and shaking and safe. He gave me that, she thought, lying down at last on the hard bed. Nobody else would have known to give me that. Draco knew the moment he came down the stairs on the 9th morning that the day had gone wrong, because the drawing-room doors stood open and Bellatrix was already there, and the fire had been built up to a roar, though the room was not cold. She was in her element. He could tell by the way she moved, loose-jointed, unhurried, a woman with an appointment she had been looking forward to since waking. Yaxley was by the window. Raoul had brought a chair round from the wall and sat in it backwards with his forearms on the rail. There were 2 others he did not know by name, and there was, on the parquet in the middle of the floor, a man. Not a man. A boy of perhaps 19, in ministry robes with the badge torn off, kneeling because his legs had stopped working, with blood dried black under his nose and one eye swollen shut. and by the fire, standing exactly where she had been told to stand, with her hands folded and her face doing nothing at all, Hermione. "Draco," Bellatrix sang out. "You're just in time. We're settling a question." He came in. He had learned to come into rooms like this the way a cat comes down from a wall, without hurry, without interest, arriving as though he had been on his way somewhere else and had merely paused. "Which question?" "Whether our new acquisition has a spine." Bellatrix nudged the kneeling boy with the toe of her boot. He made a sound. "This is Aldous. Aldous worked in magical transport, and Aldous is going to tell us where his handler goes on Tuesdays. And until he does, Aldous is going to be educated. And I thought, since our clever little friend has given us so many names, that she might like to take the lesson herself." The fire cracked. Somewhere in the house, a clock struck the half-hour, and nobody looked at it. "Give her a wand," Bellatrix said. Yaxley's head came up. "Bella!" "Her own is at the bottom of a ditch in Wiltshire, so she'll have mine, and she'll have it for 90 seconds, and there are 6 of us in this room." She was watching Hermione, and her eyes were bright and avid and utterly untroubled. "Take it, mudblood." Draco's hand was in his pocket. He had put it there without deciding to, and his fingers had closed around his wand, and he made himself take them off it one at a time, because a man with his hand in his pocket in a room like this is a man announcing something. Think faster than she can enjoy this. Hermione had not moved. She was looking at the offered wand, 12 3/4 inches, walnut, dragon heartstring, the wand that had done to Longbottom's parents what could not be undone. And Draco could read her the way he had learned to read her over 9 nights in a cold library. The minute stillness of her jaw, the fractional lift of one shoulder that meant no, and the calculation running behind her eyes at frantic speed, because she knew as well as he did that refusal was death, and compliance was a different death, slower, taken from the inside. She would refuse. He knew it with total certainty. She would do the arithmetic and find that she could not, and she would say so, and she would be dead before the sentence finished. So he laughed for the second time in 4 days, and he found it easier, and it frightened him how much easier. 90 seconds, he said. "That's generous. She'll want 3 minutes and a chair." Bellatrix's gaze slid to him. "You have an opinion. I have a complaint." He strolled forward into the middle of the room, past the kneeling boy, and stopped with his back half to Hermione, which put him between her and the wand, which was the only thing he had wanted. "You're spending it too early, Aunt. Look at her. She's been in this house 9 days. She still flinches when the peacock screams. And you want to hand her a wand in a room where every person present has killed and expect the performance to mean anything? She'll produce something feeble, you'll be disappointed, and then what? You kill her on the 9th day, before the Dark Lord has read her." The room's temperature altered. Yaxley, by the window, made a small sound of agreement he had the sense to disguise as a cough. "He'll want her intact," Draco went on, and he let a fastidious impatience into it, the tone of a man dealing with an expensive object badly packed. "Not broken open by his own people before he's had the use of her. That's not zeal, that's waste, and I've watched you explain waste to him before. It was a knife edge, and he knew it. Bellatrix's face went through 3 separate weathers in as many seconds. Fury, calculation, and then a slow, appreciative narrowing that was worse than either. "How loyal you're becoming," she murmured, "to your little acquisition." "To my neck," said Draco. "She's mine to answer for. If she's spoiled, it's my name on the ledger, and I'd like to keep it there in one piece." "Then answer for her." Bellatrix's wand came up, not toward Hermione, toward him. "Take the lesson yourself." Silence. "Bella," said Yaxley. "He wants the responsibility. He's just stood in the middle of my floor and claimed it, so let him hold it." She was smiling now, hugely delighted, a woman who has found the better game underneath the first one. "Cast, nephew, on the boy, and if it's feeble, we'll know what you are, and I'll have my 90 seconds after all." The fire roared in the grate. The kneeling boy had begun, quietly, to say something that might have been a name or a prayer. Draco drew his wand. "This is the arithmetic," he thought, with a terrible clarity. "This is the whole of it, and it has been coming since the tower, and there is no third door. He could refuse and die, and she would be alone in this house within the hour and dead within the week. He could cast and live, and be a man who had cast. There was no version in which the boy on the floor went home. He did not look at her. He had made her promise not to look at him, and he had never once broken it himself, and he did not break it now, and that was the last mercy available to either of them. Crucio. It was not feeble. He had learned at 16 from his aunt herself that the spell requires wanting, and he had never been able to want it. And he found now that this was not, in the end, an obstacle, because a man can want a great many things at once, and the spell is not a scholar of motive. He wanted her alive. He poured that into it. Every hour of the last 9 days, the cold library, the note in the baluster, the sound she made when he put his hand on her collar in the rain, and it came out of the wand as fire. The boy screamed. Bellatrix laughed like a girl at a fair. 4 seconds, 5. Draco cut it, and the boy folded onto the parquet, and the room was full of the smell of the fire and something scorched and human. "There," said Bellatrix, delighted, breathless. "There he is." "Are we finished?" said Draco. "Oh, sweet boy, we've barely—" "Because I've a letter to write to my father," he said, "and he'll want to know who's been improving my education." He turned and walked out. Behind him, he heard Yaxley say something dry, and Raoul laugh, and the boy on the floor breathe. And he did not hear Hermione at all, because she had not made a sound during any of it, not one. And he thought that might be the thing that finally killed him. He got as far as the orangery. It was the coldest room in the house, and had been derelict since before the war. Glass panes out, the vines dead in their beds, black frost on the stone flags, and the sky showing raw through the ribs of the roof. He made it to the wall and put his shoulder against it, and then he was on his knees among the dead vines, retching, and there was nothing in him to bring up, and it went on for a long time. When it stopped, he stayed where he was with his forehead on the frozen stone. Footsteps, light and quick, and he knew them, and he did not have the strength to be furious. "Go back," he said. "Go back, you idiot woman. If anyone sees you, follow me." "Nobody saw me. Bellatrix went up to change and the others are drinking." Her voice came from just behind him, and it was not steady. "Draco. Don't. Draco. I said—" He got himself up off the flags and turned around, and the sentence stopped in his throat. She was standing 3 feet away with her hands open at her sides, and her face was wrecked. Not weeping, worse than weeping. The raw, open ruin of someone who has just watched a thing they will not be able to unwatch, and who has had to keep her hands folded through the whole of it. "You did that for me," she said. "I did that because I am a coward with a wand and a functioning survival instinct, and you will please not make it into something else because I could not bear it." His voice cracked down the middle. "That boy is 19. He has a mother. In 40 minutes she will still not know, and I will still be standing in a room where people are drinking, and there is no arrangement of words that improves any part of that. Don't try. Don't you dare try." I wasn't going to. Then what? She crossed the 3 feet. She did not embrace him. There was no room in either of them for that, and it would have been a lie. She reached out and took his right hand, the wand hand still shaking, the fingers still curled from the shape of the grip, and she opened it, 1 finger at a time, exactly as he had opened his own on the arm of a chair in the library 9 nights ago, and she pressed her palm flat against his palm and held it there. Skin, nothing else. The cold coming up through the flags, and the frost on the dead vines, and the raw sky, and her hand against his hand, and neither of them saying a single word. He had not been touched deliberately and without violence by another human being in 11 months. He bowed his head. His shoulders went once, and she did not comment, and she did not let go, and she did not look away from him. And it was at precisely that moment, with his hand in hers and his breath coming apart, that a voice said from the orangery doorway, very quietly, "Whatever you are doing, you will stop, and you will come inside, and you will do it now." Narcissa Malfoy stood in the ruined doorway with frost on the flags between them and her wand nowhere in sight, which was somehow more frightening than if she had held it levelled. Hermione let go. Draco's hand fell to his side and stayed there, open, as though it had forgotten how to be a fist. "Inside," Narcissa said. "Not together. Draco, the west stairs. Girl, the terrace door and up the back way. And if you meet anyone, you have been sick in the shrubbery, which nobody will trouble to disbelieve." Her eyes moved once over Hermione's face. "Wipe your mouth. There's nothing on it. Wipe it anyway. People believe a gesture before they believe a fact." She turned and was gone through the black frame of the door, unhurried, her dove-grey skirts brushing the sill, and the sound of her going faded into the vast, cold silence of the house. Nothing happened for 2 days, and the nothing was a kind of torture with its own precise instruments. Hermione was given work, transcription in a small room off the library, copying intercepted ministry correspondence into a fair hand, because her writing was legible and Rolls was not. She sat there for 11 hours a day with a quill and a pot of ink that smelled of iron filings, and she listened to every footstep in the corridor and measured it against the memory of Narcissa's tread, and none of them matched, and the not matching was worse than a summons would have been. She saw Draco 3 times, once across the breakfast room, where he looked at her with a bored flick of the eyes, and then away. Once on the stairs, where he stood aside to let her pass with an expression of open distaste, and said, loudly enough for the portraitless wall and whoever was behind it. "Mind the carpet, it's older than your family." Once in the corridor outside the drawing room, where he did not look at her at all, and where, as he went by, the back of his hand brushed the back of hers, a contact so brief and so slight that a witness would have called it the accident of a narrow passage, and that she felt for an hour afterwards like a burn. That was the whole of it. 3 seconds of a man in 2 days, and she caught herself on the second night, lying awake and rationing them out to herself in order, and understood with a lurch of self-disgust and something far more dangerous that she had begun to live on them. The summons came on the 3rd evening, and it was not from Bellatrix. A house elf she had not seen before appeared at her elbow in the transcription room, bowed with the flinching precision of a creature that had been struck for imprecision, and said that Madame requested her. The blue drawing room was on the 1st floor, small by the standards of the house, and Narcissa Malfoy had made it the last civilized place under that roof. A fire properly laid, tea things on a low table, a work basket with silks in it, and long curtains drawn against the dark. Draco was standing at the mantel with his arms folded. His face said nothing whatsoever. "Sit down," Narcissa said. Hermione sat. "You'll take tea, because a cup in the hand steadies people, and I require you both steady." She poured. Her hands were beautiful and entirely without tremor. "Now, I am going to describe to you what I saw, and neither of you will speak until I have finished, because if either of you begins to explain, I shall have to listen to a lie, and I am too tired for it." The fire popped. Draco did not move from the mantel. "I saw my son on his knees in the orangery," said Narcissa. "I have seen him on his knees before. That did not distress me. I have grown accustomed to it, which is a sentence I would prefer not to have had occasion to construct. What distressed me was what came after." She set the pot down. "I saw a young woman cross a stone floor toward him. Nobody in this house crosses a floor toward Draco. They cross floors toward Bella, to be noticed, and toward Lucius, to be advanced, and toward me, to be pitied. Nobody has moved toward my son with an open hand in 2 years." Her voice did not change at all. "And I saw him let her." Silence. "You may speak now," Narcissa said. "She was—" Draco began. "Not you." His mother did not look at him. "You." Hermione put the cup down because her hand had begun to shake, and a rattling saucer was a confession. Lie? Lie well, and lie now. She had 11 of them ready. She had built them over 2 days at a transcription desk, tested them, discarded 4, kept 7. And she looked at this woman, at the loose, pale hair, at the exhausted architecture of her face, at the fire built up in a small room in a house where nothing else was warm. And she understood that every single one of them was worthless, because Narcissa Malfoy had not asked a question. She had made a statement about her son and waited to see whether it would be honored. "He was in a bad way," Hermione said, "and I couldn't leave him in it." "That is not an answer to a question I asked. It's the only true one I've got." She lifted her chin. "You want to know whether I care for him? I don't know. I know that I've spent 9 nights being taught how to survive by a man who could have handed me over on the first evening and been rewarded for it. And I know what he did on Thursday and what it cost him. And I know that when I saw him on that floor, there was no version of me that stayed by the wall. Her voice was going. She let it go. Whether that has a name, Mrs. Malfoy, I couldn't tell you. It hasn't had the leisure to acquire one. Narcissa looked at her for a long moment. No, she said. I don't suppose it has. She turned to the fire. When she spoke again, her voice had altered. The diction was the same, but something underneath had come loose. I have not asked what you are. I want that understood by both of you. I have not asked, and I do not intend to ask, and the reason is not delicacy. She adjusted a silk in the work basket that did not need adjusting. The Dark Lord will come to this house before the month is out, and he will look into me as he looks into all of us, and the only thing I shall have to defend is what I actually know. So I will know nothing. I will know that my son is behaving strangely because he is under strain, which is true and is visible and is unremarkable in this household. That is all I will carry. Do you understand what I am doing? You're making yourself useless as a witness, said Hermione. Narcissa's mouth moved fractionally. Quite. Mother, you will hear me out. Now she did look at Draco, and the look went into him like a needle. I have watched you for 2 years, become smaller and quieter and more careful, and I have told myself that careful was survival. And I was right, and I have hated every day of being right. And on Thursday, I stood in the doorway of my mother-in-law's orangery, and I saw you look like a person again for the length of about 4 seconds. Her hands were folded now, very tightly. So, I am not going to stop it. I want that recorded, since neither of you will ever be able to record anything. I could stop it. It would take 1 sentence to my sister, and you would both be safe from each other by nightfall, in the only way this house understands safety. And I find I would rather have you dead as yourself than alive as what you have been becoming. The fire burned. Draco had gone very white. But, said Narcissa. But, Hermione echoed. But you will not touch each other under this roof again. Not a hand, not a sleeve in a corridor. Yes, I saw that too. You are extraordinarily bad at this, both of you. Not a look held past the count of 1. She rose and crossed to the window and put 2 fingers to the curtain without opening it. Bella is not clever, but she is a predator, and predators do not detect motive. They detect pattern. She will not catch you feeling. She will catch you standing 3 inches closer than you stood in November. She will catch him leaving a room 40 seconds after you leave it, 4 times in a fortnight. That is how it will end. And when it ends, I will be made to watch. And I have already been made to watch 1 man I love be taken to pieces in this house, and I will not survive the second. She let the curtain be. You have until he arrives, she said. After that, nothing at all. Nothing. Do you hear me? Whatever is between you, put it in a box and sit on the lid. And when this war ends, and it will end, they always end, someone always finally wins. You may open it and find out what's inside. That is the best offer available. It is not a kind one. It is the only one. She went to the door. Finish the tea, she said. You will both be seen to have been reprimanded, and a reprimand takes 20 minutes. Draco, when you come down, be in a foul temper. Break something inexpensive. And she left them there. 20 minutes. Neither of them touched the tea. The fire settled and threw a long, unsteady light up the wall, and the clock on the mantel ticked, and Draco stayed exactly where he was with one hand on the marble, because the alternative was to move. "She's right," Hermione said at last. "She is almost always right. It is her most exhausting quality." "About the pattern. I've been—" She stopped, started again, and her voice came out low and furious with itself. 3 seconds. In 2 days, you have looked at me for a total of about 3 seconds, and I have been counting them, and I noticed that I was counting, and I have never in my life been so ashamed of my own arithmetic." He shut his eyes. "Don't tell me that." "Why not?" "Because I have been counting too," said Draco, "and I have got the same number, and I would very much have preferred to go on believing I was the only one making a fool of myself." The clock ticked. 11 minutes left, and the whole of the rest of their lives compressed into it, and no possible way to spend it. "When he comes," she said, "the Dark Lord, he'll read me." "Yes. And this is in me now." Her hands opened in her lap helplessly. "Whatever it is, it's not a memory I can bury under an examination hall, because it isn't a memory. It's a condition. It's in everything. He'll go looking for the order, and he'll walk straight through you to get there." Draco came away from the mantel. He stopped an exact and terrible 3 feet from her chair, which was as close as their new law permitted, and it was the discipline of that distance that undid her more thoroughly than any touch could have. "Then, we're going to build you something better than furniture," he said. "Not a memory, a grief, something that occupies the same shape as what you're hiding, so that when he reaches for the ache, he finds an ache and stops looking." His jaw worked. "You will hand him the truth about how you feel, and you will attach it to the wrong person. It has to be someone real, someone you have actually mourned, or it won't hold weight." "Who?" "You'll know. Don't say it aloud. Don't say it to me, ever, not once, because if I know the name, I can be made to give it." He drew a breath. "Every night in the library, from now until he comes, we'll drill it until it's true." "And what about you?" she said. "He'll read you too. What do you give him?" The clock ticked twice. "I've given him everything already," said Draco. "There's a room in me that's been open to him since I was 16, and he wanders through it whenever he's bored. That's the arrangement. So I keep nothing there at all, and the moment there's a single door in that house that's shut, he'll know I've built it, and he'll want to know why. And there is no answer to that question that either of us survives." She stood up. She did not close the 3 feet. She held them, and it took everything. "Then don't build a door," she said. "Build a room he's already seen and put me in it. Let him find you hating me. It's the loudest thing you own. You've been performing it for 9 days in front of 9 people. It's rehearsed. It's real in the way you said. Memories have to be real, because half of it was real once, and he'll taste that." Her voice cracked. "Make it the truth. Make it so convincing that if you ever look at me in front of him, what shows is exactly what he expects." Draco looked at her, and something in his face came apart very slowly. "Do you understand what you're asking me to spend the next 3 weeks doing?" "Yes," she said. "I'm asking you to teach yourself to hate me for real, because it's the only wall in the world he won't try to climb, and I'm asking it knowing what it will do to us both. And I want you to start tonight, before I lose the nerve to have said it." He started that night, and it was the worst work he had ever done. The library was colder than it had been in November. January had come in hard, and the frost stood on the inside of the north windows in ferns and feathers that never melted, and their breath hung visible between them while they worked. He would not light the fire. He made her sit forward, hands still, feet flat, and he went into her mind again and again and hunted for the thing she was hiding, and every time he found it, he made himself despise it. That was the method. He had explained it to her on the first night in 4 flat sentences, because a longer explanation would have been unbearable for both of them. A memory is not a picture, it is a temperature. He will not read what I think about you. He will read what I feel when your face appears. So I will train the feeling. And so, night after night, he took the small hoard of things he owned, her hand flat against his in the orangery, the 4th-year staircase and the blue dress, the sound of her saying Draco in the rain at the gate, once, before he forbade it, and he took each one out and held it up and worked at it with the file until the surface went ugly. She crossed that floor because she pitied you. She looked at you at 15 because you were the boy everyone was afraid of, and she has never been able to leave a locked thing alone. She is here because she was sent, and when she is called back she will go, and you are a corridor she is walking down. None of it was true. That did not matter. He had learned at 16 that the mind does not audit. It accepts what is repeated. By the 9th night, he could summon her face and feel the sourness rise on schedule, reliable as a tide, and he thanked God for it and went to be sick afterwards in the orangery where nobody went. She, meanwhile, built her grief. He never learned whose it was, and he never asked, and he watched it take shape from the outside like a man watching a house go up behind a hoarding. Some nights, she came out of the drill with her face wet and her hands shaking so badly she could not hold the candle, and he stood 3 feet away with his arms at his sides and did not go to her, and the not going was a discipline that scoured him hollow. Some nights she came out steady and cold and told him in a flat voice, again, and he did it again, and each time the ache he found in her was larger and better furnished and more convincingly attached to a name that was not his. It worked. That was the obscenity of it. It worked so well that by the 3rd week he could go into her at speed, hunting, and find nothing but a wall of ordinary mourning with a dead face at the centre of it, and he would come out shaken and impressed and unable to say so. Twice in that fortnight, in daylight, in front of witnesses, he said things to her that he had prepared in advance. Once in the breakfast room, about her parents, in a register of amused contempt that made Roll laugh into his cup. Once on the stairs, about the Weasleys, 4 sentences long, precise as a scalpel. Both times she went white and did not answer. Both times he felt the intended thing rise up in him on cue, that trained sourness arriving obediently, and only afterwards, alone, did the second feeling come, the real one, and he would put his fist against the wall and hold it there without striking, because a bruised hand invites questions. You wanted a wall, he told her, silently from the far end of a corridor. This is what a wall costs. Yaxley set the trap in the last week of January, and he set it well. It came to her as work, which was the elegance of it. A folder of intercepted correspondence to transcribe, as usual, and folded into the middle of it 3 pages of an operational memorandum that had no business being in a transcription pile at all. Hermione read it twice with her quill dry in her hand. A location, a farmhouse outside Ottery St. Catchpole. A date, the 4th of February. A function, a rendezvous point for the movement of a Muggle-born family of 5, with an order escort of 2, one of whom was named. The name was Daedalus Diggle. Daedalus is real. That was the first thing. Daedalus is real, and the route is plausible, and the 4th of February is 9 days away. The second thing came half a minute later and turned her stomach to ice. Nobody gave me this. It was not read to me. It was not entrusted to me. It was slid into a stack of laundry. There is no version of the world in which Corbin Yaxley leaves an operational memorandum in a mudblood's transcription pile by accident. She sat perfectly still for a long time, with the pages in front of her and the iron-smelling ink drying on the nib. The shape of it assembled itself with horrible symmetry. If the information was false, a fabrication, a name and a place invented in an office upstairs and planted where only she could find it, then it existed for exactly one purpose: to be watched. If, on the 4th of February, the farmhouse outside Ottery St. Catchpole was empty and swept, and the family had gone another way, then someone in this house had passed a message out, and there were precisely 2 people in the building who had touched those pages: herself and whoever had put them there. And if she did nothing, if she let it lie, transcribed the rest of the folder, handed it back without comment, then 5 people and Daedalus Diggle walked into whatever was actually waiting for them on the 4th, and it would not be nothing, because Yaxley did not build a trap without leaving a live tooth in it, in case the bait was swallowed. Do nothing, and they die. Do something, and I die, and then everyone I fed the order for 3 months dies with me, and Draco dies on the drawing room floor with his mother watching. She copied the folder. She copied the 3 pages too, in her neat hand, and set them in the fair stack as though they were correspondence about broomstick tariffs. And she went to bed and did not sleep. And at 1:30 she got up and went down to the library, because it was a drilling night, and because she had nowhere else on earth to take it. He knew before she had shut the door. She saw it happen, the flick of assessment, the recalculation. Sit down. I can't do this one out loud, she said. If I say it, you'll know it, and if you know it, then don't say it. Show me. He was already drawing his wand. Surface only. Push it at me the way you push the examination hall. Go. She sat forward, hands still, feet flat. Legilimens. She gave him the pages, the pile, the folder, the 4th of February, the whole cold shape of the thing, and she felt him take it. And she felt unmistakably the moment he understood, because something in the pressure behind her eyes went briefly rigid, like a hand closing. He came out. He walked to the north window and stood with his back to her, and for perhaps 40 seconds he said nothing at all, and the frost ferns on the glass were 4 inches from his face. Yaxley, he said. Yes. Not Bellatrix. She'd have set it in front of you and watched your face. She likes the theatre. This is Yaxley. He builds the box and goes away and comes back in a fortnight. He turned. Is any part of it true? Diggle's real. I don't know about the family. The route's wrong. It's the sort of route someone who's read about the Order would invent, all the right words in slightly the wrong order. She pressed her hands flat on the table. But I can't stake 5 lives on my ear for prose style. No, you can't. So, it has to go out, she said. It has to, Draco. Even if it's a fabrication, especially if it's a fabrication, because if I let it lie and it turns out to have been real, I've killed them. And if I let it lie and it's false, then in 9 days Yaxley knows the memorandum was never acted on, and he closes the file and moves on and starts building the next box. And next time, it'll be one I can't read. She heard her own voice climbing and dragged it down. But if it goes out, if that farmhouse is empty on the 4th, there are 2 people in England who touched those pages. Yes, and one of them is me. Yes. He came back to the table, which is why it isn't going to be you. What? You're going to send it, said Draco, and I'm going to be seen doing something that makes me the better answer to the question. She stared at him. No. You haven't heard the... I don't need to hear it. No. She was on her feet without having decided to stand. You are the only person in this house who cannot afford to be looked at. You brought me here. You vouched for me. If they start asking who moved that memorandum, and the first name that surfaces is Malfoy, they don't investigate you instead of me. They investigate us together. And then it's not a leak, it's a conspiracy, and conspiracies get the whole household in the drawing room and the doors shut. Which is precisely why it works. He said it very quietly. Listen to me. Yaxley isn't looking for a spy. He's looking for a leak, a channel, a mechanism. If the answer is you, it's simple and clean, and I'm finished with you. If the answer is me, it's complicated, and complicated men are expensive to kill and useful to keep. My father is in Azkaban because of a botched errand, and everyone in this house knows the family is one mistake from being taken apart for parts. His mouth twisted. I have been 3 weeks constructing a man who despises you in public. Nobody in this building believes I would cross a room to save your life. So when the leak turns out to have come from my end, they will not think lovers. They will think exactly what they already think about me. That I'm careless, that I'm frightened, that I've been sloppy with papers because I'm 16 years old in my head, and I always have been. He held her eyes. That's what I built the wall out of, Granger. It was never only to survive a legilimens. It was so that I could spend it. The candle burned. She found she could not breathe properly. You planned this, she said. You planned this weeks ago. I planned for something like it. There was always going to be a night like tonight. He turned the ring on his little finger, the silver bit into the skin. I'd rather it had been later. What do they do to you? Something short of killing me. What do they do to you? I don't know, he said. That is the honest answer, and you asked for it, so there it is. Something in front of witnesses, because the point of it is instructional. Probably Aunt Bella, because she's owed a favour, and she has been waiting since the orangery for a reason. He said it as though reading a weather report, and only his hand betrayed him, white-knuckled on the back of the chair. It won't be permanent. They can't afford permanent. My mother is the last black with a house, and the Dark Lord is fond of the house. And I stand there. And you stand there, said Draco. That is the part I have not been able to solve, and I have tried, and there isn't a solution. You will be in the room, because if you are not in the room, they will wonder where you are, and you will watch, and your face will do nothing, and you will not make a sound. His voice thinned. You did it for the boy in ministry robes, and I have never stopped being appalled by how well you did it. You'll do it for me. She came round the table. She stopped at 3 feet, the law, Narcissa's law, 3 weeks obeyed to the inch. And then, for the first time since the blue drawing room, she broke it. She took his face in both hands. Then look at me now, she said fiercely, because after this, you won't be able to, and I am not going to spend whatever comes next with the last true thing between us being a lie I asked you to build. Look at me properly. Once, I'll never ask again. And he did. The trained sourness went out of him all at once, like a candle in wind, and what came up in its place was so undefended that she nearly let go. And neither of them heard the west door of the library open, because it opened onto carpet, and because Corbin Yaxley had spent 30 years learning how to enter a room. Afterwards, she could never account for the speed of it. There was no thought involved. There was only the small, dry sound of a boot on carpet, and then her body doing arithmetic. Her mind had not been consulted about. Her hands were on his face. In the fraction of a second available, she slid them down and closed both fists in the front of his shirt and shoved him backwards into the edge of the table, hard enough to rattle the ink pot, and let her voice go up and out of her like a stone from a sling. Because you enjoy it, that's why. Because it's the only thing you've ever been good at. Take your hands off me. You brought me here. You made this. I said, take your hands. And he had her by the wrists then, and it was not gentle, and the grip left marks that lasted 4 days, and both of them understood that the marks were the point. Well, said Yaxley from the west door. They came apart. Hermione staggered back with her chest heaving, no performance required for that part, and Draco straightened his cuffs with the fastidious contempt of a man brushing off something that had climbed on him. Yaxley looked from one to the other, unhurried. He had a lamp in his hand and a sheaf of parchment under his arm, and he was not a large man, but he occupied a doorway the way a boulder occupies a stream. 2 o'clock, he observed. She was screaming at me in a corridor, said Draco. I brought her in here so the entire house wouldn't be listening to it. In hindsight, a mistake. I ought to have let her wake everyone and taken the credit for the entertainment. Screaming about what? About her parents. He said it with an exquisite weariness. I made a remark at breakfast on Tuesday, and she's been rehearsing her reply for 4 days. Apparently, I have no idea what it is to lose anything. That's the general shape. There's a section in the middle about my hair. Something that was not quite a smile moved on Yaxley's face. Is that so, girl? Hermione dragged her sleeve across her mouth. She kept her eyes on the carpet, on the worn place where 100 years of Malfoys had come in from the west door. He can say what he likes about me, she said, and let her voice shake, because a shaking voice at 2 in the morning explained everything and asked for nothing. Not about them. Ah. Yaxley set the lamp down on the reading table. Well, that's the trouble with your sort, isn't it? Everything's personal. He was already losing interest. She could hear it, the flattening of the vowels. Malfoy, when you're finished managing your acquisition, I want the Ottery correspondence back. All of it. There's a folder gone astray between the transcription room and my desk, and I dislike untidiness. There it is. She'll bring it up at 7, said Draco. Yaxley collected his lamp. At the door he paused and turned and looked back at the two of them with the mild, thorough attention of a man taking an inventory. You're in this room a great deal, the pair of you. I'm teaching her to shut her mind, said Draco. On instruction. From him. If you'd like to explain to the Dark Lord that the lessons kept you awake, do go up. He's been in the East Wing since Thursday, and I'm told he sleeps very little. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Good night, said Yaxley, and went. He had been in the East Wing since Thursday. Draco had known for 6 hours and had not told her, and there had been no way to tell her that would not have made everything worse. They sent the message out on the 2nd of February. The mechanism was crude and had been built for exactly one use. A laundry hamper that went by cart to a village woman in Wickham who took in the manor's linen and who had a daughter in the ministry's flu office and who did not know, and would never know, why a folded scrap in a pillowcase was worth 11 galleons a month. Draco had bought her in October. Hermione wrote the note in 5 words with her left hand. On the 4th of February, a raiding party of 6 went to a farmhouse outside Ottery St. Catchpole and found a swept hearth, a table with the chairs stacked on it, and no living thing but a barn owl in the rafters. On the 5th of February at 11 in the morning, every person under that roof was called to the drawing room. Hermione had been made to stand by the fire, which was where she was always made to stand, near enough to be an ornament, far enough to be forgotten. She could see the whole room from there. She had been counting the exits for 11 weeks, and it had never once been useful, and she counted them anyway. Bellatrix on the arm of the wing chair, 1 foot swinging. Rowler and Selwyn by the windows. 2 men from the raid, still in travelling cloaks, still muddy to the knee. Narcissa in the corner with her hands folded and her face empty as a shut-house. Yaxley in the middle of the carpet with the folder. And Draco by the far door, exactly where he had chosen to stand. In the open, in full view, at the point of the room where a man who wanted to be seen would place himself. The farmhouse, said Yaxley, was empty. Nobody spoke. Empty and cleaned. Not fled, cleaned. Chairs on the table, which means they were not surprised, and which means they knew, and which means that between the 28th of January, when I wrote the memorandum, and the 4th of February, when 6 men wasted a night in a wet field, the contents of that memorandum left this house. He looked up. It was written for one purpose. It was placed in one location. 3 people have touched it. 3. She had prepared for 2. The whole architecture of the night in the library had rested on 2, and now there were 3, and Hermione felt the floor of her stomach open. The girl, said Yaxley, who transcribed it. Myself, who wrote it. He turned. And Draco, who took the fair copies off her desk on the 30th and carried them up to my study because he happened to be passing, which he mentioned to me at the time, and which I did not think about again until Tuesday night, when I found the 2 of them alone in the library at 2 o'clock in the morning. The room's attention swung. Hermione felt it go past her like weather. He never told me he took them. He took them so that this sentence could exist. Bellatrix's foot had stopped swinging. "Well, nephew," she said. Draco did not move from the door. "I carried some papers up a staircase." "You carried them, and you were alone with them, and you were alone with her." Yaxley's voice had not risen once. "And I have spent a day and a half asking myself which is likelier, that a mudblood we watch every hour of the day found a way to get a message out of a house she cannot leave, or that a boy who has been careless with every responsibility he has ever been given was careless again, and left a folder open on a table where the wrong person could read it over his shoulder." "You've decided it's the second," said Draco. "I've decided it's one of the two, and that only one of them can be corrected." Yaxley closed the folder. "Bella?" Bellatrix Lestrange slid off the arm of the chair. "Oh," she said, "I've been so patient." And Hermione stood by the fire with her hands folded and did nothing. That was the entirety of what happened to her, and it lasted 11 minutes, and it took more out of her than anything before or since. She did not move. She did not close her eyes. Closing them would have been a statement. She looked at the middle distance with the dulled, mildly interested expression of a person watching a procedure she has no stake in, and she let her mind go to the examination hall, the quills, the ink, the clock on the wall, because it was the only room she had that was safe, and because if she had stayed in the drawing room for those 11 minutes, she would have screamed and killed them both. He did not scream either. That was the worst of it, that he had clearly decided in advance at some cold hour that he would not, and that he held to it for the first 4 minutes, and that when the sound finally came out of him, it was small and surprised and entirely unlike his voice. Narcissa, in the corner, watched her son with her hands folded and her face doing nothing at all, and Hermione understood then, with total clarity, what that woman had meant about not surviving the second one. At 11 minutes, Yaxley said, "Enough," and Bellatrix said, "Oh, but..." And Yaxley said, "Enough. He's the last one with a name, and the Dark Lord likes the house." And it stopped. "Get him out," said Bellatrix, flushed and bright-eyed and disappointed as a child at the end of a fair. "Somebody, not you, sissy. You'll fuss. The girl. She's standing about doing nothing. Take him up, mudblood, and if he dies in the corridor, you can explain it." The east staircase went up in 3 flights, and it took 20 minutes, and by the end of the first flight, she had stopped trying to hold him upright and had simply put his arm across her shoulders and taken his weight and climbed. He was conscious. She would have preferred that he wasn't. His room was the 4th on the left, and she had never seen it, and it was almost bare. A bed, a wardrobe, a desk with nothing on it, no pictures, no books. The room of a man who had removed every object that could be used to know him. She got him onto the bed. She shut the door and put the only chair against it, which would stop nobody, and which she did anyway. Then she knelt down and began, methodically, to take care of him. There was dittany in the cupboard by the window, a great deal of it, more than a household keeps, laid in with the quiet foresight of a person who expects to need it. She found a basin. She found the water. She worked for an hour without speaking, and he did not speak either. And after a while the shaking in his hands began to gentle, and his breathing lengthened out of that shallow, damaged rhythm into something nearer sleep. The candle burned down. Outside, February came apart in sleet against the window. She sat back on her heels at last, with her sleeves pushed up and her hands raw from the water, and looked at him. "I asked you to build a wall so that he could not see what I feel. And you built it, and then you took it down and stood in the open and used your own name as a shield, and you did it without telling me, because you knew I would have stopped you." His eyes were open. She had not noticed them open. "You didn't make a sound," he said. His voice was ruined. "In the room. Not one. No. Good. It was not good." Her own voice broke apart on it, and she pressed the back of her wrist against her mouth and made herself finish. "Nothing about it was good. I stood by a fire and thought about a clock on a wall in a room where I once sat in examination for 11 minutes while a woman took you apart, and I will be doing that for the rest of my life, in queues, in kitchens, at 2 in the afternoon for no reason at all, and you will please not tell me that it was good." He was quiet for a moment. "Come here," he said. Narcissa said, "My mother is downstairs telling 6 people that her son is a fool who leaves papers on tables, and she is doing it very well, and she will keep doing it until they believe her." His hand moved an inch on the coverlet, which was as far as it would go. "Come here." And she did. There was no room in either of them for anything grand. She sat on the edge of the bed and leaned down and put her forehead against his, and stayed there. That was all, forehead to forehead, her hand flat on the cover beside his head, and his breath going warm and uneven against her jaw. And neither of them moved for a long, long time, while the sleet went on against the glass, and the candle drowned in its own wax, and somewhere 3 floors below, a door closed on the last of the men going home. "When this ends," Draco said at last, into the small dark space between their faces, "I am going to say your name out loud in a room with the door open, and I don't much care who is standing in it." "When this ends," she said, "you can say it as often as you like." "Is that a promise?" "It's a condition of the peace," said Hermione, and she felt him almost laugh, and she was still bent over him with her forehead against his when the sound came from the corridor. Not footsteps this time, but a voice, high and cold and unhurried, asking somebody on the landing below where the Malfoy boy had been taken. The voice on the landing below was not loud. That was the thing nobody ever conveyed about it afterwards, the survivors who tried, that it never had to be. It arrived in a house the way cold arrives in a room, through the cracks, ahead of the door opening. Hermione was off the bed and across the floor and standing at the window with her back to the room before she had finished hearing the sentence. 4 steps. She had rehearsed the distance without knowing she was rehearsing it. 11 weeks of counting exits had built something in her legs that operated without permission. Examination hall, quills, ink, the clock on the wall with the second hand that jumped. She heard the chair scrape as the door pushed it aside. "My lord," said Narcissa from the corridor, and there was nothing at all wrong with her voice. "He is here. Bella was thorough. So I am told." A pause. "And the girl. Tending him, on my sister's instruction." "Ah." The door opened fully. Hermione did not turn. She had been given no instruction to turn, and in that house the safest thing a person could be was slow. She kept her eyes on the black glass and the sleet coming through the lamplight from the courtyard below, and she watched the room assemble itself in reflection. The doorway, the tall figure in it, the paleness of Narcissa hovering behind like a moth at a lamp. "Turn round, girl." She turned. She had spent 3 weeks building the grief. She had built it well. She had built it out of a name she had never spoken aloud to anyone, and she had drilled it in a freezing library until the ache of it sat directly on top of the other ache, covering it exactly the way one coin covers another. And when the pressure came behind her eyes, no incantation, no wand raised, nothing so crude, only the sudden sensation of a room in her head with the roof lifted off. She did not resist for even half a second. "Here, take it. Take all of it." He went first to the examination hall and found it dull and went past. He went to the kitchen at Grimold Place and she gave it to him. A real memory, honestly surrendered, of a room with 9 people in it deciding to spend her, and the taste of that decision, and the way Moody's eye had swiveled toward her before her name was said. He lingered there. He turned it over. He found in it exactly what he expected to find. A clever girl discovering that the people who praised her had a price at which they would sell her, and beginning to hate them for it. He went deeper and found the grief and stopped. She felt him inspect it. She felt him lift its edge with something like interest, the way a man lifts the corner of a cloth over a body. The name at the center of it, a boy from her first war, a boy who had died in a corridor at Hogwarts, and about whom she had never once been able to speak, flared up and burned, and gave off exactly the temperature that everything else in her was giving off. And there was nowhere in the whole cold architecture of her mind where the temperature changed. That is the trick, Draco had told her on the 14th night. Horse 3 feet away, not touching her, not to hide the heat. You can't hide heat. You spread it so evenly that there's no gradient to follow. The pressure withdrew. "You are not lying to me," said Voldemort mildly. "No," said Hermione. "You are grieving. How tedious. They all grieve." He had already lost interest. She could hear it, the flatness coming into the vowels the way it had come into Yaxley's. "Yaxley wishes me to believe you moved a document. Yaxley wishes it because Yaxley wrote the document and would prefer the failure to belong to somebody else." A soundless amusement moved through the room. "Look at the bed." She looked. "That is what carelessness costs in this house," he said. "He is a fool, and fools are cheap, and I have never yet found a use for a clever man that I could not find for a frightened one. Do you understand me?" "Yes." "Then be frightened and be useful, and do not make me come up these stairs again." He was gone. The cold went out of the room by degrees, the way cold does long after the door has shut. Narcissa remained in the doorway. She stood there for perhaps 10 seconds with one hand flat against the frame, and Hermione watched a woman hold herself upright by architecture alone, and then she straightened and smoothed her skirts and said in a perfectly ordinary voice, "There is more dittany in the still room. I will have it sent up," and left. Hermione got as far as the chair before her legs went. The message came out of the laundry on the 22nd of February, and it was 4 words long, and Draco watched her read it twice in the frost-ferned library and knew before she spoke. "They're pulling me out," she said. He had been expecting it for a month. He had been expecting it specifically since the 5th of February, when he had understood in the middle of the 11th minute that there was a limit to what he could spend, and that he had begun spending capital he did not have. When? The 1st of March. There's a window. The Dark Lord goes north again on the 28th and takes Yaxley and Roll, and Kingsley says the wards on the west boundary thin when the household drops below. She stopped. Her hands were shaking, and she flattened them on the table to stop it. 6 days. 6 days is generous. It's more than I'd have given you. Draco. They'll want one more thing from you before you go. He said it evenly, because evenness was the only tool he had left. They always do. Look at the note again. Is there a rider? She looked. There was. Bring the Bellwood ledger. He shut his eyes. The Bellwood ledger was in Yaxley's study, in the second drawer of the escritoire, under a locking charm that Draco had watched being laid in October and had spent 4 months not thinking about. It contained the names of 11 people in the ministry who had been turned, and the sums, and the dates, and it was the single most valuable object in the county, and it was in a room on the 1st floor of a house in which she was permitted on 4 staircases and no others. No, he said. They wouldn't ask if... They would. They have. They asked once already, and you walked up this drive in the rain. He came off the window. Listen to me. That drawer is charmed against anyone who isn't a Death Eater or a Malfoy, and you are neither. And if you put your hand on it, the alarm goes into Yaxley's ring wherever in England he happens to be standing, and there is no version of that night where you leave this house alive. Then what do you suggest? That you go on the 1st of March, said Draco, with nothing in your hands, and that you let me deal with the ledger. The silence in the library had a texture. He had come to know it, the particular grain of a quiet in which 2 people are both calculating, and both know that the other is calculating. You'll be here, she said. After. Yes. When they find it gone, and the girl gone in the same week, and the only person in this house with Malfoy blood and access to that drawer still standing in the hall. Yes. Then no. She stood up. No, I'm not doing it. I'll go without the ledger, or I won't go at all. You will go, said Draco, on the 1st of March, and you will go without arguing, because I have 3 days of arguing left in me, and I would rather spend them on something else. Come with me. It landed in the middle of the room like a dropped glass. He had known she would say it. He had rehearsed 9 answers, and every one of them was a lie of a different weight. And standing there in the cold with the frost ferns 4 inches from his shoulder, he discovered that he could not use any of them. My mother is in this house, he said. Then bring her. She will not come. He heard his own voice go rough. I have asked. Twice, in November before you arrived, and again in the 1st week of January. And she gave me the same answer both times, and the answer is my father. He is in a cell in the North Tower of Azkaban, and the day Narcissa Malfoy is seen crossing to the other side is the day he stops being an inconvenient prisoner and becomes a message. He turned the ring on his little finger and the silver bit. She has done the arithmetic. She did it years ago. She is staying, and if she stays and I go, they will do to her what they cannot do to me. Hermione's face did something he had never seen it do. So, that's it, she said. That is it. You get me out, and you take the ledger, and you stand in the hall on the 2nd of March with your mother beside you, and let them work out which of you to start with. That is a very bleak reading of a plan I consider adequate. Don't. Her voice cracked straight across. Don't be clever at me. Not now. You have been clever at me since November, and I have let you, and I am not letting you tonight. She crossed the room. She did not stop at 3 feet, and neither of them pretended any longer that the law still stood. And she took hold of the front of his shirt in the same place, with the same fists, as on the night Yaxley came through the west door. "Say it," she said. "Whatever it is you've been not saying since the orangery, because you are about to arrange your own death very tidily, and I will not have it happen with a thing unsaid. I will not." "I love you," said Draco Malfoy. It came out of him quietly and without ornament, in a freezing library at 10 o'clock at night, and it was the first entirely undefended sentence he had spoken aloud in 2 years. "There," he said. "It has been true since the 4th night, when you gave me an examination hall and I laughed for the first time since I was 16. I have spent 3 weeks teaching myself to be sick at the sight of you, and it took, and it will not come off, and I will be carrying it around inside me like a swallowed nail for the rest of whatever I get. And underneath it, every hour unaltered, there is this." His hands had come up to cover hers. "So no, I will not come with you, because if you are out of this house, I can do a great many things I cannot do while you are in it, and the first of them is stop being careful." She was weeping. She did it in absolute silence, which was a skill she had acquired in this building, and he thought that if he lived, he would spend a great deal of his life trying to make her unlearn it. 6 days, she said. 6 days. "Then I want them." Her fists tightened in his shirt. "Not the drills, not the wall. I want the 6 days, and I want you to stop standing 3 feet away from me, and if the house sees, the house sees." "The house will not see," said Draco, "because we are going to be extremely careful for 144 hours, and then you are going to walk out of that gate, and then I am going to be as reckless as I like." And he lifted one hand and pushed the hair back from her wet face and held it there, palm along her jaw, thumb at her cheekbone where a bruise had been in November. And she turned her mouth into his wrist, and neither of them moved, and the candle burned, and it was the closest either of them had come, and still not close enough. And it was at that exact moment that the west door opened onto carpet for the second time in 4 weeks, and Narcissa Malfoy said, without any inflection whatsoever, "The 1st of March is too late. She goes on Friday, and I am coming with you both, and we have 4 minutes to decide it." They did not touch for 4 minutes. They stood on opposite sides of the reading table and listened, and Narcissa spoke without once raising her voice above the level of a woman discussing the linen. "On Wednesday, your father was moved," she said. "Not released, moved, from the North Tower to the lower cells, which is where they keep the ones they no longer intend to use. Snape had it from Travers and told me at 11 o'clock this morning in the still room while I was counting bottles." Her hands were folded. They were perfectly steady, and Draco understood that this was the most frightened he had ever seen her. "So, the arithmetic has changed. I have been staying to keep him alive, and he is no longer alive in any sense that requires me. Do you see?" "Mother," Do not. One syllable, and it stopped him. I have had 6 hours with it, and I have wept the amount I intend to weep. Now, Yaxley leaves for the north on Thursday night with the Dark Lord and takes Roll and Selwyn, and Bella will remain because Bella is always left behind, and it's the only thing that reliably humiliates her. That leaves 4 in the house, one of whom is my sister, and she drinks after midnight, and she does not wake. She turned to Hermione. You were going to be asked for the Bellwood ledger. How do you? Because I have run this house for 19 years, and I know what is in the escritoire, and I know what your people would consider worth your life. Narcissa's mouth thinned. The drawer will open for me. It has always opened for me. Corban Yaxley laid a charm against Death Eaters and Malfoys, and did not think to consider that I am both and neither, which is precisely the mistake men of his sort have been making about me since I was 19 years old. I will have the ledger off the shelf by 1 o'clock on Friday morning. Draco found his voice. And then? And then the 3 of us walked down the drive, said his mother, and out of the gate, in the dark, on our own feet, exactly as she came in. The wards read intent, not blood. They always have. They will not stop a Malfoy leaving. They have simply never been tested by one who meant it. It rained on Thursday. Of course it rained. That county did nothing else that winter, and Draco would think for the rest of his life that the last hours of his old existence had a sound, and the sound was water finding a fault in a gutter. He spent the day being ordinary. He ate breakfast. He was rude to a house elf and apologized to it silently and internally, and despised himself for the cowardice of the silence. He watched from an upstairs window at 4 o'clock as 3 men and a tall, thin figure went down the drive in the wet and disapparated, one after another from beyond the gate. And he stood there for 10 minutes after the last of them had gone, gripping the sill until his knuckles ached, and then he went down to dinner and sat opposite his aunt and talked about broom regulations for 40 minutes. At midnight, Bellatrix went up with a decanter. At 12:30, Narcissa Malfoy walked into Corban Yaxley's study, opened the second drawer of the escritoire with her bare hand, took out a book bound in oxblood leather, and put it inside her coat. At 1, they went down the east stairs. Hermione carried nothing. Draco had told her to carry nothing, and she had obeyed, and it was only on the second flight that he realized she had disobeyed in one particular. She had the linen napkin. The one he had wrapped a heel of bread in on the first night, in a chair by a fire, with her face swelling shut. She had kept it for 15 weeks, in a house where possessions were evidence, and she had it now, folded small in her fist. He did not trust himself to say anything about it. They got as far as the hall. The chandelier was unlit. The marble held the cold of the whole county, and the great doors stood at the far end, and there were 40 feet of open floor between, and Bellatrix Lestrange was standing in the middle of it in a dressing gown with her wand down at her side. "You're all up very late," she said. Nobody moved. "I couldn't sleep," Bellatrix said. "Isn't that funny? 14 years in a cell and I could sleep through anything, and now there's a house and a bed, and every night I lie there and listen." She tilted her head. "I heard the escritoire. It has a squeak. It's had a squeak since our mother's day, and I told Corbin, and he said I was fanciful. "Bella," said Narcissa. "Don't." The wand came up. "Don't you bella me, standing there with your coat on. I have watched you for 4 months. I watched you not ask questions. I watched you not ask a single question about that girl, and you have asked questions about everything since you were 6 years old. You asked so many questions our father used to send you from the table." Her voice was rising and cracking. "You were going to leave, without telling me. You were going to walk out of our mother's house and leave me in it." Something moved across Narcissa's face that Draco had never seen there. "Yes," she said. Bellatrix screamed, and the hall went white. Afterwards, he could never assemble it properly. He had a fragment of himself pulling Hermione down and sideways behind the newel post, a fragment of the chandelier coming off its chain and detonating across the marble in a wave of glass, a fragment of his mother's voice saying a word he had never heard her say. He came up firing, and his aunt turned his curse aside without appearing to look at him, and the return caught him across the ribs and put him on the floor among the glass, and then Narcissa was between them. They fought the way sisters fight. That was the horror of it. They knew each other's forms, each other's feints, the exact angle at which the other had held a wand since childhood, and they moved through the wreckage of that hall with a dreadful intimacy, and neither of them landed anything for 11 seconds. Then Hermione Granger, who had been wandless for 15 weeks, picked a wand up off the floor. Raoul's, left on the hall table with his gloves, because Raoul was careless and had gone north without it, and shouted from behind the newel post, and Bellatrix's wand went out of her hand and end over end across the marble and into the dark under the stairs. Bellatrix did not even look at it. She turned, unarmed, and came at Hermione across the glass with her hands out, and Narcissa said very quietly, "Stupefy," and her sister went down 4 feet short and did not move. Silence. The rain. Glass settling. Narcissa stood over her with the wand still up and did not lower it for a long time. "Mother," said Draco from the floor. "Yes," she said. Her voice was absolutely level and her face was wet. "Yes. Get up. Bring the girl. It is a long walk to the gate." They walked it in the rain, all 3, and nobody spoke, and it took 11 minutes. At the gate, the black iron, the beading water, the hedges gone wild in a way the Malfoys would once have considered a personal humiliation. Hermione stopped and put her hand flat on the wet metal in exactly the place she had put it in November, and stood there for a moment with her eyes shut. Then they stepped through, and the 3 of them turned on the spot, and the drive was empty. The war ended on the 2nd of May, and neither of them was where the story was. Hermione was in a cellar in Bristol with the Bellwood ledger open in front of her and a list of 11 names, and she learned it had ended from a Patronus that came through the wall at 4 in the morning in the shape of a lynx and said 8 words. Draco was 200 miles away, doing something with a portkey and a family of 4 that he never afterwards described in detail. They found each other 11 days later in a corridor at the ministry among 400 people and did not touch because the habit was in the bone and would take years to leave it. The hearing was in September. She testified for 40 minutes. She had prepared 11 pages and used none of them. She stood up in a courtroom under a ministry that was rebuilding itself out of rubble and told them about a boy at a gate in the rain who had said, "I'm going to be very convincing," and about a note wedged in a loose baluster with 4 words on it, and about a man who had taken an armful of fair copies up a staircase on the 30th of January, so that a sentence could exist on the 5th of February. She told them about the 11 minutes. She told them what she had thought about during them, and the courtroom was very quiet. And somewhere near the back, a woman with pale hair sat with her hands folded and her face doing nothing at all. The Wizengamot conferred for 19 minutes. It was not a pardon. It was something duller and better, a finding entered on the record with a name attached to it. She found him afterwards on the steps of the ministry's Muggle entrance in an ordinary London street in September light. He was standing with his hands in his pockets, looking at the traffic, like a man who had forgotten what it was for. He had put on a little weight. The grey had gone out from under his eyes and left something merely tired in its place, which was, she thought, an improvement of the kind that takes years to finish. "Well," he said, "well, you were very thorough." "I was accurate," said Hermione. "There's a difference, and you know it." A bus went past. A man in a hurry stepped around them, irritated, and did not look at either of them twice. And it occurred to her that this was the first time in her life she had stood beside Draco Malfoy in a place where nobody in the world was watching them, and that the fact of it was so enormous she could not hold it steady in her head. He seemed to arrive at it at the same moment. She watched him arrive. "There was a thing I said," he began, "in February, in the library, about saying my name out loud in a room with the door open. That was the one." "There isn't a door," Hermione said. "We're in the street." "Yes." Draco looked around at the buses, the pigeons, the man selling papers on the corner, the whole indifferent racket of a city that had never once cared what either of them did. "Yes, I'd noticed. It seems excessive. I only asked for a door." And he said her name. He said it the way she had known he would, quietly, without ornament, in the middle of a public pavement at 4:30 in the afternoon, and it cost him something to do it, and she saw the cost cross his face and be spent. And then he took her hand, in daylight, in front of 400 strangers, and did not check a single window. She came up off the step and kissed him. It was not smooth. 15 weeks of measured distance and 7 months of habit did not dissolve gracefully. His hand shook where it found her jaw, and she caught the corner of his mouth before she found the rest of it, and somebody behind them laughed the way people laugh at lovers in the street. Neither of them heard it. He made a small sound against her mouth that had nothing performed in it, nothing rationed, nothing built for an audience. And she understood, with her fingers in his collar and the September sun on the back of her neck, that this was the first thing either of them had ever done in the open. When they broke apart, he did not step back to 3 feet. He stayed exactly where he was. "Again," she said. "Here?" "Here," said Hermione Granger. "And tomorrow, and in a kitchen, and in a queue at a post office, and every unremarkable place we can find, until you stop counting the seconds. And then we'll simply be 2 people, and nobody will look at us at all, and that will be the whole of it." And he laughed, properly, out loud in a London street, and pulled her in again, and they stood on the steps of the ministry with the traffic going by, entirely visible, entirely unhidden, taking as long as they liked.
Thank you for staying until the end. I want to tell you one small thing about writing this story. There is a scene in the orangery. Draco in his knees. He has just done something terrible, and Hermione walks to him. She does not hug him. She does not say anything. She just takes his hand and opens it, one finger at a time, and she holds it. That scene took me the longest to write, much longer than the fights, much longer than the pain, because I kept asking myself one question: what do you do when there are no good words left? I think the answer is simple. You stay, you come closer, you put your hand there. While I was writing, I thought about people who love in silence, people who cannot say it out loud, maybe because it is dangerous, maybe because they are afraid, maybe because nobody taught them how. And I thought about this. Hiding love does not make it smaller, it makes it heavier. So maybe this is the moral. Love is not proved by big words. It is proved by what do you do when nobody is watching. And when it is finally safe, say it. Say it loudly. Do not wait for a better day. Draco waited a whole winter to say her name out loud. Please do not wait that long. Thank you for listening. Take care of your people.